There was a genuineness about Anthony. When he cared, he cared. When someone needed help or would ask, you could trust that he would help it the best way he knew how, and would go the extra mile. That he was dependable, that he was honest. His integrity, I think, was amazing to watch young men like that. And just because when Anthony said something, he was telling you the truth. You didn't have to wonder, is he just making it up or whatever. Anthony told it as it was, and his friends trusted that, and they knew that he cared enough about them to give them his best shot.
Anthony was not always the fastest runner. He was on varsity the majority of the time that he ran cross country, but he was not always the fastest. But I will say he always gave it 110%. Even he battled injuries. He had injuries with it. He had a knee injury, but I think not being the fastest, he made up for it in so many other ways because he was such a good teammate. He really pushed his teammates. He really wanted them to do as well as he was doing. And don't get me wrong, he was very competitive, so he wanted the varsity spot. He definitely, but he was much more than just a fast runner.
The morning of the accident happened at 2:23 a.m. The police came here about 5:30. The sheriff had the number of our pastor, so he called Chip and told Chip what had happened. Chip was in here within, I don't know, it seemed like 2 minutes. Of course, it's a little bit of a blur. I'd say by 6:30 that morning till about 11 o'clock that night, that was the Saturday, there were people in and out of the house constantly. I don't know if we had any time during that day where there were not people here.
So we're here today to talk about the Hawkins family and the fact that they've been chosen as the Victim Family of the Year by Mad Georgia. So what does that really mean?
Yeah, the Hawkins family this year are going to be featured as the victim family. Each year, Mad Georgia honors a victim family, typically at their Walk Like Mad fundraiser. But because of the pandemic, we're not having the fundraiser as a walk. It was going to be a virtual event, and now we're going to do a different virtual event that's not going to be a walk or a fundraiser per se. But we're still going to honor the victims and specifically honor the Hawkins family. And it is an honor to be selected.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Well, all the victims suffer terribly, obviously. But each year, Mad Georgia has a family that they feature for all the other victims. And every story is, in a manner of speaking, each story. But the Hawkins, their path was interesting, and I wouldn't say unique. I wish I could say it was unique. But like all the victims, they suffered the loss of a loved one. In this case, their son, Debbie and Al's son, Alita's brother. And, they pursued justice, and both, pursuing the civil recourse against the at-fault driver's estate, because she was killed in the collision also. But in addition to that, pursuing the dram shop defendant, because it was a notorious bar and grill, well known for serving patrons in excess, and they would then drive home and cause a tragedy like this. And the Hawkins were driven to become advocates and take their grief and turn it into something good for other people. And by that, they pursued justice against the dram shop defendant to the point of making change, effecting change. And I have heard firsthand from law enforcement in that area and people that live in that community, this place operates differently today than it did when it caused their loss. So we had two other lawyers involved with it. Doug Peters, who practices in another area of law but had a family connection with the Hawkins. And Doug he did a great job of vetting a number of lawyers that he thought would be good candidates to represent the Hawkins family. And he told me, he was very honest. He said that, I'm in the running to talk to them and interview with them. And if they choose me, great. If they don't, that's, their choice. And there was some excellent company that was meeting with the Hawkins family. A lot of lawyers would have loved to work with this family, and they were a great family to work with. And Doug did his homework, and he was part of that process and vetted each of these candidates, and eventually I was lucky enough to be picked by the Hawkins to pursue the case for them. Along the way, John Houghton joined forces with us for the case. John is probably one of the three most experienced lawyers in Georgia in these cases.
A dram is sort of derived from English common law, and a dram is actually a measured size of a glass of alcohol. And dram shops were sort of the pubs in Old England. Dram shop liability was derived from the notion that if you are a proprietor or a business owner and you are serving folks to the point where they can't make good decisions, the law has a remedy for that.
When you have a loss such as the Hawkins suffered, you're never going to replace that loved one. And it seems empty to say to these people that you're still going to wake up in the middle of the night with a hole in your heart and cry yourself to sleep. The only thing we can offer is that as you cry yourself back to sleep, you will not also be worried about the mortgage or other financial obligations. And the Hawkins set up 2 scholarships that are funded for like 20 years. And that's a tremendous living legacy in and of itself. They also set up a memorial run that brings the awareness for young people. They are missing Apple tremendously, but they have a financial security that is beneficial. They're still waking up in the middle of the night and crying themselves to sleep.
Sure.
You can't change that. But the living legacy is he will never be forgotten. And the scholarships will make a direct impact on people he's never even met.
Buck and myself have been involved with MAD for well over a decade. Buck, almost 2 decades, I think. They serve as a wonderful sounding board for these victims in these cases. They serve as basically a go-between for the victim with the prosecuting district attorneys in these cases. Victims, by their nature, have so many questions in the aftermath of this sort of tragedy. And Mothers Against Drunk Driving was founded as a victim advocacy organization, and they do a tremendous job of helping folks like Al and Debbie and other victims that I've represented before that really soften the prosecuting process and help sort of hold their hand throughout. And the contribution we made in this case, I think just allows MAD's budget to go a little bit farther. And really, I wish organizations like MAD had an endless budget, but there's a lot of nonprofits out there that do a lot of different things. But for your contribution, I think MAD does the most for any victim that I know of, especially in the case of a completely avoidable tragedy like this. So at the conclusion of the case, we were overjoyed to be able to contribute back to MAD for all the stuff that, all the things they've done over the years for our victim clients.
What's so exciting is that this is MAD's 40th anniversary. MAD was founded on September 5th, 1980 in California by a grieving mother who lost her daughter to a drunk driver. And in 40 years, we always laugh and joke in the organization that people know more about MAD than they think they do. For example, the term designated driver was made popular by MAD. And also the minimum drinking age of 21 in all states was also pushed through legislation by MAD. And so in 40 years, we're very proud that we have cut drunk driving deaths in our country by more than half every year. But our goal is to get to zero. Our tagline is no more victims. We are particularly grateful to some of our families that have actually been impacted by drunk driving, who in turn come back and invest in MAD. One of those families is Al and Debbie Hawkins. They tragically lost their son, Anthony, affectionately nicknamed Apple, in September of 2016. He was a college student, a cross-country athlete, and was most often the designated driver for his friend group. And after Anthony was tragically killed by a drunk driver, the Hawkins family was helped through their process by MAD's Victim Services Unit. They were helped through their grief process. They were helped through the subsequent legal processes. And remarkably, they in turn reinvested in the most generous way to MAD. For those who haven't been impacted by drunk driving, unfortunately, the reality is 2 out of 3 people in our country will at some point. It may be a member in your house of worship. It may be a family member. It may be someone in your community. For me, it was a junior high school classmate the year MAD was founded. When people give to MAD, we want them to know that 85 cents of every dollar goes directly back into programming. That means supporting the victims of these violent crimes, uplifting and supporting and recognizing our law enforcement heroes that keep our roadways safe, making sure that we are doing the appropriate outreach and prevention education to our schools and colleges and community groups. And so MAD is a trusted organization. We have a 40-year history of doing amazing work in our country, as well as in MAD Canada and MAD Brazil. And we want to make sure that you know that your investment in us is going to all the right places.